Assalamualaikum dan selamat pagi. Anda bersama saya Nabilah, Khaleeda dan ini Niaga AWANI. Seperti biasa pada jam ini kita akan berikan laporan berita bisnes kewangan dan juga ekonomi dalam termasuklah luar negara. Namun antara tumpuan ini hari ini adalah berkenaan dengan pembiayaan lebih 1 bilion kepada Sapura dan kita nak tahu juga apa nasib kepada vendor lain dan kita mulakan dengan perkembangan pertama ini. Pelaburan oleh Malaysia Development Holding Sdn Berhad MDH dalam Sapura Energy Berhad SEB akan digunakan secara eksklusif untuk membayar pembekal vendor tempatan tanpa memberi manfaat kepada mana-mana pemegang saham SEB atau penyutang kewangan sedia ada. Menurut Permodalan Nasional Berhad PNB sebagai pemegang saham utama SEB sedia ada, PNB menjelaskan pembiayaan itu penting untuk kelangsungan kewangan penyedia perkhidmatan Malaysia dalam ekosistem minyak dan gas, memandangkan SEB mempunyai lebih 2,000 vendor, kebanyakannya adalah PKS serta menggaji kira-kira 59,000 pekerja teras dalam industri minyak dan gas.
PNB memaklumkan SEB adalah penyedia perkhidmatan kritikal untuk industri minyak dan gas Malaysia dan pelaburan itu menyokong perniagaan tempatan serta mengekalkan integriti rantaian bekalan. Memelihara SEB dan ekosistem minyak dan gas yang lebih luas adalah penting untuk kesinambungan projek yang menyumbang kepada hasil dan jaminan tenaga negara. Malah inisiatif itu memastikan kestabilan dan kemajuan keseluruhan rantaian nilai minyak dan gas Malaysia. Menurut kenyataan itu lagi, tanpa SEB dan vendor tempatan, kerja tersebut perlu disumberluarkan kepada penyedia asing dan bukan Malaysia, mengakibatkan pembayaran mengalir keluar dari Malaysia. Pelaburan itu juga katanya akan memastikan kerja minyak dan gas negara akan terus dilakukan oleh rakyat Malaysia, memberi manfaat kepada PNK, Pendapatan Negara Kasar Malaysia, sebanyak 1.1 bilion ringgit dan memberi kesan positif kepada kadar pertukaran mata wang Malaysia. Menurut PNB, pelaburan itu penting dalam memudahkan penyelesaian salah satu langkah pengstrukturan hutang terbesar di Malaysia melibatkan beberapa bank terbesar. Pelaburan itu juga akan membantu mengelakkan pembubaran SEB yang akan mengakibatkan penjualan aset minyak dan gas strategik negara secara lelongan di dalam dan luar negara. Pelaburan oleh MDH akan dilakukan selepas pemerintah institusi kewangan SEB bersetuju dengan potongan berkesan yang ketara serta potongan tidak langsung akibat kehilangan nilai daripada penukaran hutang kepada saham pada premium yang tinggi. Selain itu, pemegang saham SEB sedia ada akan mengalami pencairan yang ketara daripada penukaran saham di bawah skim pengstrukturan hutang. Sebagai sebahagian daripada skim pengstrukturan, SEB telah menjalankan proses ketekunan wajar undang-undang dan kewangan yang komprehensif serta semakan perniagaan yang komprehensif oleh pakar bebas termasuk semakan kawalan dalaman dan pengurusan risiko yang menyeluruh. PNB menjelaskan pelaburan itu adalah konsisten dengan negara lain yang telah lakukan untuk memelihara industri strategik mereka.
Terdahulu, Sapura Energy Berhad SEB memperoleh pelaburan 1.1 bilion ringgit menerusi langganan saham pinjaman boleh tebus, boleh tukar RCLS pada nilai nominal oleh Malaysia Development Holdings Berhad MDH. Dalam kenyataan pada Selasa, SEB menjelaskan pihaknya telah memeterai perjanjian pembiayaan bersyarat dengan MDH menandakan satu lagi pencapaian penting dalam usaha penstrukturan semula kewangannya mengukuhkan komitmen SEB terhadap kemampanan jangka masa panjang.
MDH, sebuah syarikat tujuan khas Menteri Kewangan diperbadankan, menetapkan hasil langganan itu hanya akan digunakan untuk penyelesaian atau pembayaran liability yang terhutang oleh SEB Group kepada penyedia perkhidmatan Malaysia yang beroperasi dalam atau menyokong sektor minyak dan gas di Malaysia. Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif SEB Group Muhammad Zamri Junsuh berkata, pembiayaan itu merupakan usaha penting bagi memulihkan kestabilan kewangan kalangan vendor Malaysia dalam ekosistem minyak dan gas yang telah mengambil masa bertahun-tahun untuk dibina. Menurut beliau, vendor di bawah SEB kebanyakannya adalah perusahaan kecil dan sederhana PKS yang mengalami kesukaran kewangan semasa dan selepas pandemik COVID-19. Menurut SEB, pelaburan itu susulan sokongan padu daripada pemiutang terhadap skim pengaturan komposit yang melibatkan SEB dan 22 anak syarikatnya di bawah Seksyen 366 Akta Syarikat 2016. Muhammad Zamri berkata pihaknya sedang menumpukan usaha pelan penyusunan semula yang kukuh yang akan membawa pihaknya selangkah lebih dekat untuk keluar daripada status syarikat PN17. SEB menyokong kira-kira 2,300 vendor Malaysia dan kira-kira 1,800 daripadanya adalah PKS. Syarikat itu telah memberikan kontrak bernilai 7.3 bilion ringgit kepada vendor Malaysia dalam tempoh 5 tahun lepas.
Baik, bagi mengulas lanjut perkara ini, kita akan bersama dengan Presiden Majlis Perkhidmatan Minyak, Gas dan Tenaga Malaysia MOGSE Teknologi Syed Sagaf Syed Ahmad. Selamat pagi, Assalamualaikum. Dan mungkin pertama sekali, kalau kita nak fahami tentang perkara ini dan apakah implikasinya, bagaimana pelaburan 1.1 bilion ringgit oleh MDH ini memberi kesan kepada vendor dan kestabilan kewangan vendor secara keseluruhannya. Silakan.
Assalamualaikum, selamat pagi Nabilah. Terima kasih kerana jemput MOGSE untuk hadir pada pagi ini. Saya rasa saya just nak berkongsi sedikit that MOGSE selama beberapa tahun semenjak Sapura dilanda kemelut kewangan, kami telah vokal dan juga bersuara lantang untuk memastikan pertolongan diberikan sewajarnya kepada Sapura. Dan kami telah membuat engagement bersama pihak pengurusan Sapura untuk memastikan semua vendor-vendor yang dihutangi oleh Sapura mendapat bayaran secara penuh. Dan kami juga menghantar surat kepada Kementerian Kewangan dan juga secara terus kepada Perdana Menteri Malaysia juga untuk meminta sedikit intervensi kepada masalah Sapura. Kerana kita kena faham yang Sapura ni adalah satu syarikat gergasi dan kita perlukan mereka mempunyai kelangsungan di dalam menjalankan bisnes mereka supaya vendor-vendor ni terpelihara. Sebab apa yang kita tak mahu, yang salah satu request kita ataupun saranan kita kepada kerajaan dan juga kepada pihak Sapura adalah dalam setiap skim penstrukturan semula syarikat, biasanya vendor akan terkesan lebih berat kerana ada haircut ataupun pemotongan daripada jumlah hutang. Kadang-kadang vendor hanya dapat 30% saja daripada apa yang dihutangi. Jadi kita sarankan kerana vendor setelah tunggu lama untuk mendapatkan bayaran, kita mahu mereka dibayar secara penuh dan pada kami ini adalah satu berita yang kami sangat gembira dan industri sangat melihat benda ini adalah sesuatu yang sangat positif untuk kita maju ke hadapan di dalam industri minyak dan gas ini.
Seperti yang dikatakan Tuan Syed, ini adalah permintaan yang telah lama diusulkan. Namun kalau sebelum kita berbincang lanjut, mungkin Tuan Syed boleh terangkan dan juga senaraikan antara cabaran kewangan yang dihadapi syarikat vendor sebelum pelaburan ini dilakukan.
Buat masa ini kita kena faham that sudah hampir 3 tahun semua vendor-vendor, lebih kurang 2,000 lebih vendor yang mempunyai jumlah hutang lebih kurang 1 bilion ringgit. Ini adalah satu jumlah yang sangat besar kerana cara industri minyak dan gas ini berfungsi, kita memerlukan syarikat-syarikat gergasi seperti Sapura dan juga kontraktor-kontraktor utama lain untuk menjaga ekosistem di dalam industri minyak dan gas ini. Jadi kebanyakan vendor-vendor di bawah Sapura ada yang company besar sederhana dan juga kebanyakannya adalah company-company SME, PKS. Jadi mereka sangat terkesan dan untuk mereka bertahan selama lebih kurang 3 tahun untuk mendapat bayaran, saya rasa itu adalah satu bukti yang kemampanan dan juga daya saing yang sangat tinggi daripada semua vendor-vendor tersebut. Jadi ini sangat membantu kerana untuk bertahan selama ini untuk pergi ke hadapan, ini adalah satu berita yang amat-amat kita perlukanlah. Jadi kita harap dengan bantuan ini, kerana eksklusifly duit ini perlu digunakan untuk membayar vendor-vendor, kami yakin kami sangat yakin yang kita akan berjaya, akan maju ke hadapan yang lebih bagus selepas ini.
Baik, dengan tumpuan kepada perusahaan kecil dan sederhana PKS terutama sebagai tulang belakang ekonomi negara kita, mungkin Tuan Syed boleh jelaskan lebih lanjut bagaimana pembayaran liability oleh SAB yang tepat pada masanya mempengaruhi aliran tunai dan operasi vendor. Mungkin secara keseluruhannya kalau boleh Tuan Syed kongsikan.
So kalau kita tengok dalam industri minyak dan gas ni, dia ada dalam bentuk piramid. Kita ada pengeluar minyak di bahagian atas, kita ada Petronas, Shell dan berbagai-bagai lagi pengeluaran minyak. Dan di bawah itu kita ada syarikat-syarikat besar yang menjadi tunggak utama dalam industri minyak dan gas. Akan tetapi seperti yang saya nyatakan, kebanyakan syarikat-syarikat menduduki di piramid terakhir, di tangga terakhir di dalam rantaian bekalan ini. Di mana lebih kurang dalam industri minyak dan gas, kita mungkin ada lebih daripada 60,000 daya pekerja yang memberi khidmat kepada industri minyak dan gas. Dan jadinya ini akan memastikan aliran wang tunai yang betul boleh disalurkan kepada semua semua level atau semua peringkat dalam industri oil and gas. Dan saya rasa ini akan memberi satu impak yang sangat penting, dan kebanyakan PKS yang terlibat secara khusus dengan masalah Sapura akan boleh menyelesaikan masalah mereka. Tetapi saya juga ingin menyatakan, kerana Sapura sebagai kontraktor utama, mereka mempunyai kontraktor kedua di mana akan dijangka mendapat bayaran. Kita juga ingin mengesyorkan dan juga betul-betul menggalakkan kepada semua kontraktor di peringkat kedua ini memastikan aliran wang tunai itu turun pula kepada peringkat ketiga dan keempat. Kerana ini sangat penting. Kerana kita perlu betulkan rantaian bekalan ini.
Dan Suntikan nilai 1.1 bilion ringgit ni bukan sikit ya, banyak sebenarnya. Jadi kalau kita nak tahu, mungkin kalau boleh Tuan Syed jelaskan apakah perubahan operasi khusus yang dapat dilaksanakan hasil daripada sokongan kewangan ini yang sedikit sebanyak boleh memberi kelegaan.
Kalau kita tengok ada banyak potensi yang terdapat pada syarikat Sapura untuk maju ke hadapan. Di satu masa dia adalah salah satu syarikat terbesar oil and gas di dunia, bukan di Malaysia saja. Jadi kita kena pada pendapat Moxie, kita perlu memberikan mereka sedikit ruang untuk mereka maju ke hadapan, kerana ia akan memberi satu spillover effect kepada ekosistem di dalam Malaysia. Dan jika mereka berjaya dan juga boleh membawa Sapura ini ke luar negara, saya rasa ia akan memberi sedikit peluang juga kepada vendor-vendor tempatan untuk berdaya saing di peringkat antarabangsa. Dan saya rasa ini suntikan yang sangat penting supaya Sapura boleh regularizekan dia punya financial dan mungkin memberi mereka impetus untuk maju ke hadapan dengan lebih bagus lagi.
Dan apabila suntikan 1.1 bilion ringgit ataupun pelaburan ini dilakukan, sedikit sebanyak ia akan juga membantu mengekalkan atau mengembangkan tenaga kerja. Kita tahu sekarang tenaga kerja kita telah menunjukkan pergerakan yang positif dari semasa ke semasa, namun dengan pelaburan ini bagaimana ia membantu dengan lebih lanjut?
Saya rasa kalau kita tengok, kalau saya huraikan untuk industri minyak dan gas, saya juga ingin mengambil kesempatan jugalah untuk menyatakan bahawa industri minyak dan gas ni adalah satu industri yang sentiasa akan berkembang dan maju ke hadapan. Walaupun kita sentiasa diperkenalkan dengan renewable energy dan juga tenaga energi mampan, akan tetapi saya ingin menyatakan juga oil and gas sehingga target net zero carbon kita pada 2050, oil and gas still akan mempengaruhi lebih kurang 80% daripada jumlah tenaga yang akan di dalam Malaysia. Jadi sampai tahun 2050, jadi oil and gas industri ini akan sentiasa berkembang dan sangat penting. Jadi suntikan modal seperti ini, dan saya juga nak menggalakkan kepada semua syarikat-syarikat kewangan juga dan juga mungkin government agencies untuk melihat bagaimana untuk membantu the whole ecosystem untuk oil and gas. Bukan setakat Sapura, tetapi apa yang boleh dilakukan supaya company-company, syarikat-syarikat di dalam minyak dan gas ini sentiasa berdaya saing dan mendapat suntikan modal yang sempurna dan juga untuk maju ke hadapan. Kerana kita akan menjadi lebih penting pada masa akan datang kerana aspirasi Petronas untuk memastikan 2 million barrel of oil equivalent per day pada tahun 2025 dan ke hadapan. Jadi industri ini sangat penting dan perlu diberi sedikit perhatian daripada semua pihak, daripada kerajaan dan juga daripada industri kewangan.
Dan saya nak tahu juga kalau boleh Tuan kongsikan, adakah terdapat projek atau kontrak yang berisiko sebelum pelaburan ini dan bagaimana situasinya berubah sekarang, dan kita nak tahu juga mungkin peranan yang Tuan Syed fikir vendor tempatan seperti Tuan yang usahakan boleh mainkan peranan dalam kestabilan dan juga pertumbuhan industri minyak dan gas secara keseluruhannya.
Secara rawaknya, industri minyak dan gas adalah satu industri yang sangat berisiko. Itu tidak boleh dinafikan. Akan tetapi dari pihak Moxie, salah satu usaha kita yang paling besar dalam 4-5 tahun kebelakang ini adalah untuk kita berjumpa dengan pemegang taruh seperti Petronas dan juga pengeluar-pengeluar minyak lain untuk memastikan keadaan kontrak yang diberikan kepada pemain-pemain utama seperti Sapura dan lain-lain adalah kontrak yang kita panggil equitable, di mana kontrak yang tidak berat sebelah dan juga kontrak yang boleh memastikan pemain-pemain industri boleh maju ke hadapan bersama dengan oil operator dan pengeluar-pengeluar minyak. Saya rasa itu adalah satu usaha yang sangat penting. Kami sentiasa berhubung dan juga berkomunikasi dengan pihak Petronas untuk memastikan that kita keluarkan kontrak yang kita boleh mempunyai daya saing untuk maju ke hadapan. Itu adalah sangat penting. Buat masa ini, saya rasa kita sudah agak berjaya di mana kebanyakan kontrak yang dikeluarkan. Kalau you tengok Sapura pun, Sapura ni mempunyai kontrak integrated di mana dia bertanggungjawab untuk menjaga ekosistem. Jadi mereka perlu mendapat kontrak yang sepadan supaya dia boleh jaga ekosistem secara khususnya. Itu adalah usaha yang sangat penting dan kita akan meneruskan usaha kita sebagai salah satu kita punya fokus area.
Kita berbakikan dalam lebih kurang 2 minit secara ringkas dan secara mungkin mudahnya, apa cabaran terbesar lain yang mungkin masih dihadapi walaupun adanya dengan pelaburan ini, dan mungkin adakah terdapat sokongan atau langkah tambahan yang mungkin Tuan Syed percaya boleh ataupun perlu untuk kejayaan berterusan vendor tempatan kita?
Ya, kita perlukan financing sebab kita rasa kadang-kadang pengusaha, pemain-pemain syarikat minyak dan gas, kita sedikit terpinggir apabila kehadiran renewable energy dan juga fokus ke arah sustainable energy. Saya nak beri sedikit gambaran bahawa kepentingan syarikat oil and gas untuk maju ke hadapan. Kita sering cakap mengenai CCUS, Carbon Capture, Utilization Storage Technology. Akan tetapi ada momen kepentingan syarikat minyak dan gas untuk menghasilkan CCUS, kita still akan memerlukan khidmat-khidmat tradisional oil and gas untuk memastikan aspirasi ke arah net zero carbon ini boleh dicapai. Jadi saya menyeru kepada semua pemegang taruh di luar sana, kita perlukan sedikit dialog dan engagement supaya bagaimana kita boleh memastikan kemampanan OGSC di Malaysia ni sentiasa terjaga, dan sedikit perhatian khusus perlu diberikan supaya kita boleh maju ke hadapan yang lebih mampan.
Baik, terima kasih diucapkan kepada Presiden Majlis Perkhidmatan Minyak Gas dan Tenaga Malaysia MOXI Tuan Syed Teknologi Syed Sagal Syed Ahmad atas perkongsian itu, dan segala perbincangan ini akan kami rangkumkan dalam semua platform digital Astro AWANI dan juga astroawani.com. Baik, Suruhanjaya Pencegahan Rasuah Malaysia SPRM dijadual mengambil keterangan bekas Perdana Menteri Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob hari ini. Ia bagi membantu siasatan kes rasuah dan pengubahan wang haram yang dikaitkan dengan beliau. Dan untuk perincian lanjut, kita akan bersama dengan Khalis Kadir yang kini berada di perkarangan Ibu Pejabat SPRM Putrajaya. Khalis, kongsikan apa perkembangan terkini dari lokasi.
Baik, terima kasih Nabilah di Bukit Jalil. Sekarang saya berada di perkarangan Ibu Pejabat SPRM di mana sekitar jam 10 dijadualkan bekas Perdana Menteri Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob dijadual akan diambil keterangan sekali lagi mengenai dengan kes pembibitan beliau yang dikaitkan dengan beliau, iaitu mengenai kes rasuah dan pengubahan wang haram yang dihadapinya, di mana kehadiran beliau sekali lagi ditegaskan oleh Ketua Pesuruhjaya SPRM Tan Sri Zambaki sebelum ini adalah sebagai seorang suspek dan bukan sebagai saksi. Dan apa yang dapat saya kongsikan adalah keadaan di sekitar kawasan ini adalah di mana para pengamal media sudah pun mula mengambil tempat untuk membuat liputan, termasuk juga media antarabangsa, yang beberapa media agensi media antarabangsa yang turut hadir, di mana ini juga bakal menjawab persoalan sama ada berapa jam keterangan akan diambil oleh SPRM terhadap Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob, dan mungkinkah adakah terjawab juga beberapa persoalan lain, adakah akan direman atau sebagainya. Tetapi kehadiran Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob ini juga belum dapat dipastikan sama ada mungkin adakah ada lanjutan MC seperti sebelum ini, di mana pada sebelum ini pada 7 Mac sepatutnya dijadual untuk dirakam keterangan, tetapi berlaku ada beberapa isu juga di mana lanjutan MC itu sehingga 12 Mac iaitu pada semalam, dan oleh itu ia dibawa kepada hari ini 13 Mac untuk dirakam keterangan, dan ini juga dapat disahkan melalui kenyataan Tan Sri Azam Baki baru-baru ini, di mana beliau memaklumkan bahawa setakat ini tiada sebarang maklumat oleh Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob, oleh pihak Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob jika ada penundaan kerana tidak ada perkembangan terkini. Dan ketika ini para pengamal media juga sudah bersiap sedia, saya kira mungkin pada bila-bila masa Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob akan tiba untuk dirakam keterangan. Dan seperti yang kita tahu juga bahawa ini merupakan boleh dikatakan kali kedua apabila pada sebelum ini pada 10 Februari ketika Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob membuat pengisytiharan harta, beliau sudah pun diambil keterangan kira-kira 5 jam bagi menjawab spekulasi ataupun bagi membantu siasatan. Dan ketika itu juga Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob dipanggil sebagai suspek, mana disahkan oleh Tan Sri Azam Baki menerusi sidang media baru-baru ini. Dan beberapa hari kemudian selepas Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob diambil keterangan pada ketika itu, 4 individu termasuk 2 bekas pegawai kanannya ditahan SPRM untuk siasatan lanjut, dan rentetan daripada itu kemudiannya membawa kepada penemuan yang mengejutkan negara juga, iaitu 170 juta ringgit pelbagai mata wang asing yang ditemui di beberapa premis, termasuk antara salah satunya di sebuah safe house di Kuala Lumpur. Dan itu juga membawa kepada penemuan 16 kg jongkong emas bernilai kira-kira 7 juta ringgit. Semua barang rampasan itu ditemui dalam 3 peti besi di sebuah safe house di Kuala Lumpur. Dan apa lagi yang dapat saya kongsikan ketika ini adalah rentetan daripada ini banyak juga kenyataan daripada pimpinan negara, termasuk juga pimpinan utama politik, khususnya daripada Presiden UMNO sendiri, Datuk Seri Ahmad Zahid Hamidi, yang menegaskan bahawa isu ini ataupun barang rampasan nilai jutaan ringgit sebelum ini adalah tidak terkait dengan UMNO. Ia bukanlah daripada dana politik ataupun kutipan daripada UMNO sebelum ini. Dan juga kenyataan tegas daripada Datuk Seri Ibrahim memastikan kes ini berjalan dengan lancar, adil, tanpa selektif. Saya kira mungkin setakat itu dahulu, Nabilah, perkembangan di karangan SPRM ini. Jika ada perkembangan terkini, kita terus saja berjelas langsung selepas ini. Terima kasih, Nabilah. Terus saja kepada Nabilah di Bukit Jalil.
Untung bersih sains teks berhad pada suku kedua berakhir 31 Januari 2025 susut 12.1% kepada 123.95 juta ringgit berbanding 141.01 juta ringgit pada suku kedua berakhir 31 Januari 2024. Kesan kelemahan segmen pembukusannya. Kumpulan itu berkata keuntungan operasi segmen itu berjumlah 42.1 juta ringgit pada suku yang ditinjau, susut daripada 64 juta ringgit setahun lalu berikutan peningkatan persaingan pasaran dalam produk pembungkusan industri, manakala produk pembungkusan pengguna kekal stabil. MCE Holdings berhak menerima kontrak utama bagi membekalkan komponen mekatronik ke Amerika Syarikat dan pada masa sama membentuk usaha sama dengan Eagle Group dari Hong Kong bagi mempelbagaikan kerja pembuatan kontrak yang bukan otomotif. Perkembangan strategi itu dilakukan melalui anak syarikat milik penuhnya, Multi Code Electronics Industries M Berhad, dengan kontrak selama 60 bulan bersama pembekal otomotif berpangkalan di Michigan, Amerika Syarikat, iaitu JVIS USA LLC. MN Holdings berhak menerusi Mutu Nusantara Sedang Berhad menerima kontrak 168.9 juta ringgit daripada Syarikat Pusat Data Antarabangsa bagi pembinaan infrastruktur kuasa pusat data di wilayah Selatan Semenanjung Malaysia. Katanya kontrak itu diberikan bagi kerja-kerja kejuruteraan, pemerolehan dan pembinaan projek pencawang 27533 kV akan menyumbang secara positif kepada prestasi kewangan kumpulan dan mengukuhkan lagi kehadirannya dalam sektor infrastruktur tenaga Malaysia. Laporan penuh di saluran 501 dan astroawani.com serta dagangnews.com.
Baik, untuk waktu ini saya akan bawakan perkembangan terkini berkenaan dengan ringgit di mana ia ditutup rendah berbanding dolar Amerika Syarikat pada Rabu berikutan pelabur berhati-hati sebelum data inflasi Amerika Syarikat dikeluarkan lewat malam Rabu dan dalam keadaan perang perdagangan global yang semakin meningkat. Pada 6 petang, ringgit turun kepada 4.4260 atau 4.300 berbanding dolar Amerika Syarikat daripada 4.4100 atau 4175 ketika ditutup pada Selasa. Dan pada waktu ini saya akan kongsikan data terkini berkenaan dengan ringgit di Malaysia. Kalau kita boleh tunjukkan setakat 9.27 pagi, ia berada pada paras 4.325 kalau kita boleh tunjukkan untuk setakat hari ini. Kalau kita bandingkan dengan semalam, ringgit itu mengukuh sedikit iaitu pada paras 4.4132 dan kami akan teruskan bawa perkembangan ringgit pada hari esoknya Jumaat. Dan untuk perkembangan seterusnya adalah berkenaan dengan Bursa Malaysia di mana indeks FTSE Bursa Malaysia KLCI atau FBM KLCI terus mencatatkan penurunan melepasi paras sokongan 1490 hingga 1500 didorong oleh kebimbangan pelabur yang meningkat terhadap kesan potensi pertikaian perdagangan global yang semakin memuncak. Naib Presiden Penyelidikan Ekuiti Rakuten Trade Senin Berhad Tong Pak Leng berkata, indeks terantau utama kebanyakannya lebih rendah apabila pelabur berhadapan situasi yang tidak menentu berpunca daripada ekonomi yang berpotensi untuk mengucup. Pada 5 petang, FBM KLCI merosot 35.32 mata atau 2.32% kepada 1484.83 berbanding 1520.15 ketika ditutup pada Selasa. Indeks itu mencatatkan penurunan hampir 10% tahun ke tahun. Saya akan tunjukkan perkembangan Bursa Malaysia untuk setakat pagi ini. Yang terkini adalah 1490.97 naik sebanyak 6.14 dan juga 0.41%. Kita secara ringkas akan tunjukkan dalam jangka masa seminggu. Kita dapat saksikan penurunan Bursa Malaysia FTSE Bursa FBM KLCI dalam jangka masa seminggu bermula Jumaat minggu lepas. Kita dapat saksikan ia melepasi paras 1550. Namun kita dapat saksikan trend penurunan itu sehinggalah hari ini Khamis, sehinggalah nilainya adalah 1489.87 dan ini berlaku atas beberapa faktor dan ini termasuklah perang perdagangan yang berlaku di peringkat Amerika Syarikat dan negara-negara lain. Baik, saya akan teruskan dengan perkembangan seterusnya di mana Donald Trump threatened on Wednesday to escalate a global trade war with further tariffs on European Union goods as major US trading partners said they would retaliate for trade barriers already erected by the US president. And just hours after Trump's 25% duties on all US steel and aluminum imports took effect, Trump said he would impose additional penalties if the EU follows through with its plan to enact counter tariffs on some US goods next month.
And as you know, we're going to be doing reciprocal tariffs. So whatever they charge us, we're charging them. Nobody can complain about that. Whatever it is, it doesn't even matter what it is. If they charge us 25 or 20% or 10% or 2% or 200%, then that's what we're charging them.
Trump's hyper-focus on tariffs has rattled investors, consumer and business confidence and raised recession fears. Canada, the biggest foreign supplier of steel and aluminium to the United States, announced 25% retaliatory tariffs on those metals along with computers, sports equipment and other products worth $20 billion in total. Canada has already imposed tariffs worth a similar amount on US goods in response to broader tariffs by Trump. Canada's central bank also cut interest rates to prepare the country's economy for disruption. The 27 countries of the European Union are less exposed, as only a small fraction of targeted products are exported to the United States, according to Germany's Kiel Institute. The EU's countermeasures due to take effect next month would target up to $28 billion worth of US goods like dental floss, diamonds, bathrobes and bourbon, which likewise account for a small portion of the giant EU-US commercial relationship. China's foreign minister said Beijing would safeguard its interests, while Japan's chief cabinet secretary Yoshima Sahayashi said the move could have a major impact on US-Japan economic ties. Close US allies Britain and Australia criticized the blanket tariffs but ruled out immediate tit-for-tat duties.
Meanwhile, US stocks advanced on Wednesday as cooler than expected inflation data helped staunch a sharp sell-off, while the escalation of US President Donald Trump's chaotic multi-front tariff war kept gains in check. The S&P 500 and the Nasdaq closed in positive territory, the latter enjoying a muscular boost from tech and tech-adjacent momentum stocks.
The blue chip Dow waffled between red and green for much of the session but ended modestly lower on the day. The S&P 500 gained 27.23 points or 0.49% to end at 5,599.30 points, while the Nasdaq Composite gained 212.36 points or 1.22% to 17,648.45. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 82.55 points or 0.2% to 41,350.93.
I mean, the boost in the market today is largely because of less severe inflationary report. And so therefore some hope that the Fed put is kind of coming back alive. And we've seen some evidence of that lately. I mean, the market's been in a correction. It's been due for a bounce. It's almost looking for any excuse to try to find its footing. Whether this is the start of a recovery, however, is a little bit premature to know. But again, I think the primary reason for today's bounce is maybe less negative news in general and a little bit of positive news on the inflation front.
The Labour Department's Consumer Price Index showed consumer prices cooling more than analysts expected, providing reassurance that inflation is headed in the right direction and keeping hopes alive that the US Federal Reserve could cut its key interest rate this year. On Monday, the S&P 500 dipped below its 200-day moving average, considered a significant support level, for the first time since November 2023. On March 6, the tech-heavy Nasdaq dipped more than 10% below its record closing high reached on December 16, confirming it has been in a correction since then.
All right, stay tuned for more updates after this with my colleague Nina Rozman and Ibrahim Sani. Don't go anywhere.
Nak coklat? Hari ni tak boleh. Nanti saya kena dengan mak saya.
Pepsodent baharu disahkan halal. Microkalsium aktif dan Pro-Florida Complex membantu memperbaiki lubang halus akibat makanan manis sebelum menjadi kaviti untuk perlindungan maksimum. Pepsodent.
All right, today we're diving deep into one of the most pressing concerns of our digital age, which is cybersecurity. Businessmen, you can say individuals, are becoming more interconnected online. So the importance of safeguarding our data has never been greater. And for this discussion, I welcome you, our guest, Danny Kim, the founder of Full Armor and Cyber Armor. I want to say thank you very much, Danny, for joining me. Firstly, we want to talk about Full Armor and Cyber Armor. How did you start focusing on cybersecurity, and how did this journey leading to the growth of Full Armor and Cyber Armor?
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. I just want to also thank the Asian Institute of Insurance that actually has invited me here to talk about this subject, both also to your corporate customers in Malaysia. That's a great question because I actually started when I was in high school.
Wow, quite early.
Quite early, but actually I was into gaming.
Okay.
Back then it was like video arcade gaming.
That was the kickstart.
That was a kickstart. But then I got into coding, and then I kind of got bored of creating games. And so I started getting into hacking into copying copyrighted games. And maybe I shouldn't say this online, but...
Okay,
but,
on TV.
On TV, online on TV.
But this is your past
it actually got me interested because the whole field of even back then, cybersecurity, copy protection, breaking protection elements was challenging. And so as I started doing that, I started to learn how to defend against it. And then that propelled me into the career of computer science, into college. And then I met my college roommates that had the same kind of passion for starting ethical businesses. And so that's kind of where we started. We started in college in 1987, the Full Armor Corporation, and we started closing customers one at a time from there.
I mean, it's not easy to starting with your probably housemate, right? Roommate. And then because starting at an early age, you know, you have to understand the whole ecosystem, the landscape, the challenges, the threat, and even opportunities. Within the cybersecurity industry, what was the biggest challenge you have faced? You know,
as cybersecurity, so we started back 38 years ago. So if you can imagine, things were a lot simpler back then. You have computers and maybe they're connected. As the economy and the global interconnectedness grew, the complexity of trying to keep your environment secure becomes exponentially difficult. And so now we're working with the largest companies in the world, you know, the Walmart, Boeing, Bank of Americas of the world, and even the US government. And now it's a cat and mouse game, and we're trying to keep up from the cyber criminals. And it's a real challenge because they're using the latest technologies and advancements to hack into our systems. Wow. And even with AI, they're using AI, and we're trying to help now defend using AI. So it's a constant battle. But that's also, from a personal standpoint, why I'm so interested in this field, because it never gets boring.
Previously, before the interview start, you shared with me you start almost Full Armor around 38 years.
Yes.
It's almost 40 years. How do you see the landscape of ecosystem of cybersecurity has evolved, other than you see the growth of where cyber criminals are using AI, where AI is used for us to for efficiency work, but now they're using that probably along the journey. How do you see it has evolved in cybersecurity?
Yeah. That's a great question, because I joke that even if I take vacation for like a few months, I'm already behind. This is how quickly the cyber landscape is changing. One particular example is I actually attended a U.S. Cybercom conference. This is an internal conference of U.S. cyber military personnel, and I was one of the few civilians invited to attend. And the head of the NSA and the head of the U.S. Cybercom said this. They said 5 years ago, our whole cybersecurity defense mechanism was, can we block the enemy at the gate? Right? Firewalls, VPNs, gateways, you know, all the things that every corporations know and utilize to defend. He said today, it's trying to figure out how much of our enemy is already inside our network.
Okay, that is one of the hardest part.
That's the hardest part, because now you have to change the way you view cybersecurity. We're not saying stop using the firewalls and gateways and whatnot, but it's a different tactics, because now, as everybody knows, and if I talk to almost every cybersecurity professionals I talk to, they nod their heads. It's kind of a, maybe I shouldn't be exposing all of this, but it's a kind of an uncomfortable secret. People know it, and you kind of, I think we know on the consumer level, because we see all of these hacks coming constantly from major companies. The threat actors are already inside your network. And US government and others are all now constantly trying to battle. How do we protect the assets and information that we have? And so,
especially when they're in already our server.
Well, it's an uncomfortable feeling, Nina. If, let's say I tell you, you in your house, you have your doors locked and your windows locked and you have your gate and whatnot. But if I come and tell you, Nina, you know, the thieves are already inside your house.
I'll get more scared.
Yes.
Yes. I need more probably protection, a bigger, stronger protection.
Or a different way of protecting and hiding your assets, being able to, there's a different approach to cybersecurity. And so that's actually where, and to be on the positive side, there are innovations being done in cybersecurity. But one of the things, and maybe it's my personal mission, because I know kind of the dirty secrets of how vulnerable we really are, I'm doing part of the education, is to let people know that, one, we are very vulnerable to now this new threat of cyber attacks and a new generation of cyber attack methods that have already here, that are already come in. And we need to create and look at new ways of defending.
Talking about vulnerability, if to recap your answer, it's not easy. Usually you have to prevent cybersecurity at the front of the gate. But now, what kind of approach, if they're already inside our gate,
Yeah.
So that is something that we have to look at. Talking about vulnerabilities, what are some of the probably vulnerabilities the organization overlook when securing their cloud or data center infrastructure?
Well, there's multiple ways of approaching cybersecurity. The first one is actually training your employees.
Okay.
Believe it or not, the number one way your corporations get exposed is through the employees and the lack of knowledge, security knowledge. So training, awareness, good security practices, password policies, recognizing phishing attacks and all those things. Actually, without naming names, there was one company that gave me the actual data. There was a hospital system in the US that told me, that this is from the CISO of the hospital system. They said they did a test, a test to see how many of their own employees, doctors and nurses and whatnot, would fall for a phishing attack where they sent emails and said that, hey, you need to reset your password, right? Because it's, something happened to your personal thing, and then and people, they wanted to find out how many people would go online to an obscure website and actually enter their username and password. And 40% responded and put their username and password in it. Oh, so then they went through and did all this training, internal training. Hey, don't do this, look out for this. And then they did the whole simulated attack again. Do you know how many percent went back on?
70, I assume?
They got a little bit better, 25%.
Okay, sorry, 25%.
Yeah. So you can't change human nature to some degree. And these are professionals, these are doctors and whatnot. That's indicative of the type of open potential of training that's needed at the company level. And then you go into the actual IT.
Okay.
There's a lot of basic stuff that people aren't that needs to be done, from policy, compliance management, securing the network. So all the basic stuff, just like you would do in the house, hey, before you go on vacation or secure, make sure your windows are closed, your front door is locked, and things like that. So those are the basic stuff that we all need to do. And then the companies that are more advanced are going deeper, right? As I told you, you're in this house, and the people who know what's going on, they know the thieves are already inside. So what do? There's now a new set of technologies called EDR, XDR, that's trying to detect. There's a lot of people going in and out of your house, let's say. You're trying to detect which one is a thief and which one is a guest, right? So it's a constant battle. But what companies need to realize is that this is very critical. This affects your business, because it could affect, if you go to a company and they get breached and all your personal data stolen, you may want to go to a competitor because maybe they're more secure.
True, correct. Other than we can see full armor, cyber armor is providing the service to protect them in the era full of cybersecurity threats. It's not easy. Probably we need help and support and protection from the law enforcement as well. Yeah. So maybe how could businesses and even governments approach cybersecurity regulation to balance not only security but also innovation?
I think one of the advances in regulation, and the US has enacted this recently as well, and I see other countries enacting the similar thing, is one, mandatory board education. We need the board to support the expansion and utilization of the latest technologies. You can't kind of use the same tools you used 5 years ago and expect that the thieves haven't already found a way around it. So it's an investment. But for the boards and senior leaders, they need to understand it's an investment in the security and the business continuity of their company. So that's one. So there's mandated board education and senior leadership education. And then recently there's been policies enacted to compel companies to report cyber breaches, right? Before it was actually done on a voluntary basis. In the US, it has become law. So if you're a public company, you could face jail time if you don't report your cyber incidences and you don't recover or do forensics on your breach. That's and I believe even in Southeast Asia, other countries are enacting and have started looking at those type of laws. That's actually a positive for the consumer, because we want to know and you want to use the services and companies that actually have invested in cybersecurity and are secure. And even when you're breached, which is not a bad thing in the sense that everybody's breached, you're going into this mode of, you know what, if we're breached, we know what to do, and we know we have to be responsible to being able to respond to that.
And we can see that even in the US, they have law. I mean, we can see based on the company, if your company is at US, but we can see US one of the advanced company. So probably they have more funding, more costs, and more resources.
Yes.
But we know cyber threat is for everybody. Not we're wishing for everybody, but
yes.
It doesn't matter where you are. If you're advanced or emerging economy, everybody can receive the threats
yes.
that they don't want. So probably what can emerging economies like Malaysia or other ASEAN countries can learn from advanced economy as they have more resources, funded costs to learn and adapt the best practices towards cybersecurity.
Yeah, actually one of the things that I've seen people do as best practices but actually not practice the best practice, and one of the areas that I see is really lacking that could really help corporations significantly. And by the way, in the US, yes, there's a little better preparedness and awareness. But if you think about cyber hackers and cyber criminals, they don't care what country you're from.
No.
Right? And to be honest, they're going to attack countries or environments that have lots of assets that they can steal, that have low cyber resilience and cyber knowledge. And so to some degree, sometimes they're bypassing US companies and saying, let me go to developing countries that actually have brought in lots of business, Malaysia being one. You guys are booming and growing. You're bringing in international global companies. Great. That's an awesome thing for your economy. But it's also, and I'll tell you from a cyber criminal standpoint, that's an ideal target
it's
area.
Opportunity for the criminal as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have things that I want, and your awareness and preparedness is not as high as maybe some of the other countries. Now, what can you do to help mitigate that? One of the things that I recommend when I do my board briefing is you need to have already a set of plans. You need to plan for an attack and write down and be able to create a cyber response mechanism to what will happen. Because if you don't plan, then you don't know what to do.
True.
Problem is now, everybody's done this plan, right? But just like, let's say, I don't know if you remember when you were in high school, and I used to go through fire drills, right? Why do we do fire drills in schools?
Safety.
Safety, but also because when it happens, you know what to do. You don't have to go through, oh, there's a fire drill plan. Let me bring the fire drill plan out. Let's go step by step. You don't do that, right?
No.
When you do a fire drill, it's so that you practice, and so that when the incident happens, you know exactly what to do. And everybody collectively knows what to do, right? You need to go to this station, follow this teacher, whatever. Here's the problem, and I think 90% of companies in the world, not just Malaysia or Southeast Asia, don't do this. They'll put a great cybersecurity incident response plan together. They'll never practice it.
True.
It'll be stored in next to the company handbook, right? And look this up when an incident happens. It is completely against logic because the frequency of cyber incidents is only increasing. If you haven't been breached already, you may not even know it. Because sometimes a lot of the breaches happen. They'll steal your information, put it on the dark web or sell it, and you don't ever even know. So learning how to respond to cyber incidences and then practicing it. This is what's called war room experience, right? Very few company does it. So one of the things that I'm actually bringing in with the Asian Institute of Insurance is actually we're creating and we're going to be deploying war room experiences.
Oh, wow.
So you get to go in, sit in a conference room, and in an hour session, depending on industries that you want to look at, we'll actually recreate an actual cyber incident. And you will go through it with other people in the war room to understand what it means to go through a cyber incident and also be able to respond to it. And that's really one of the missing pieces I see in the industry today.
And that is a very important aspect that we should take a look at, because this is also some of the lessons that companies should learn. one of the most significant security breaches probably of the last decade. But as you mentioned in the middle of our conversation, that probably if you go on a holiday for a few months and then you look at the back, and then some criminal changes have different approach, and then cybersecurity also need to probably customize their practices or to respond toward the criminal attacks. And from all of this, maybe you can talking about the ethical business of cybersecurity, because we understand that how can we address ethical concern in cybersecurity as if regarding surveillance, data privacy, and government regulation, because given the resilience of cloud computing.
Yeah, I mean, cybersecurity is one of those things where a lot of your data information that's critical is exposed now to the world, because there's very few companies I know that is not connected to the internet and connected to somehow the data being accessible, right? The biggest problem also that we see in the industry today is you're not in an operation that operates alone. You are actually interfacing with third-party suppliers, other corporations, partner organizations. And so it's not just securing your own environment. You have to trust the partners that come in, right? And so a lot of the recommendations that I also give is how to vet out and certify the trustworthiness of your partner companies. Because if you look at some of the more famous breaches that have happened, a lot of them are coming through third-party vendors, right? A company like Home Depot or Target would actually be completely secure, and then their HVAC vendor gets hacked. And they come in through a back door. So it doesn't matter how secure you are, you have to also vet out and secure the partners that you work with. And so there are standards you want to have other partners adhere to. So hey, if I was a vendor wanting to work with you, you should require that I display the type of security protocols and standards that I'm meeting, because I may be a backdoor into your corporations. So you want to make sure you trust. It's the same thing. You don't want to bring people into your house that are strangers that you haven't vetted out, right? Because who knows? Maybe somebody says, I'm Danny Kim, but I'm pretending to be Danny Kim. I come in and I steal your stuff, or maybe hide in your house. So you want to make sure that you vet out the people that you let into your corporate environment.
And we don't want that to happen in almost 40 years within the industry. Maybe you can share with us, what's your outlook for the cybersecurity industry? Probably we cannot say in 5-10 years, because you say even a few months, if you're gone for a few months, things are going to change very fast. But maybe you can tell us what's the future like for cybersecurity? Okay,
that's a great question, because I have a great answer for that. Cybersecurity, if you look at, actually in most forecasts, actually just for the forecast for this year, they're expecting $10.5 trillion in losses due to cybercrime, okay? Wow. Now, let's say you don't believe that figure, it's maybe a little bit off. Let's say it's even 50% off. That's $5 trillion in losses, even if I'm 50% off. Wow. So the industry is reeling from this type of crime, and it's growing by 15-20% every year. So I actually tell all my friends who have kids who are looking into going to different careers, I said, there's only 2 careers that will never go away. Medicine, because everybody's going to get sick and die, and cybersecurity, because we're only going to get more hacked and more hackers are going to look for vulnerabilities to get in. So the outlook for this industry in a negative positive way is that the threat of cybersecurity is only increasing as we become more and more interconnected, as new technologies like AI enter the field that makes it easier for cybersecurity hackers to come in. We need to be utilizing those new technologies to defend against it. So if you want the outlook, it's only going to get worse, but also it's a market opportunity, right? We have worldwide probably 3 million or more unfulfilled cybersecurity jobs. It's a huge crime. In the US alone, we're looking at 200,000 to 300,000 unfulfilled. And actually the US government deems that a point of national threat, because we don't have enough cybersecurity professionals defending. They believe it's a ratio for every cybersecurity professional defending the US government. There's 50 hackers trying to break in.
Well, we need the talent and the skills in cybersecurity because...
So it's not just the talent, the skill set of training your own employees and your IT staff, but from a country standpoint, it's educating the next generation of young adults and professionals to go into this field. And so, again, I could tell you 20 years from now, I'll still be employed. I'll still be doing everything I want to do in this space because it'll only become more expansive and there'll be more newer ways of attacking this type of environment. Okay. And so, again, the market outlook is always going to be there's a cybersecurity need, and that need is only going to grow.
It's going to become more dynamic. Probably my last question. You, as the CEO and founder of a cybersecurity company, what's your advice towards the board and C-suite executive on cybersecurity policy, especially not the board C-suites, not from the cybersecurity industry?
I would say get educated.
Simple.
That's the only way. When I do my board briefings, they come out shocked because they're not being told everything, and it's kind of business as usual. I would say, at the very least, even bring outside consultants in that have experience in the trending of cybersecurity, because you can't keep doing things status quo. It's not working. The industry is telling us this. Even when I talk to the heads of the FBI in the US, the cyber threats are increasing at an alarming rate. And so corporations need to understand and be educated in what are the different methods and threat vectors that are coming in today, so they're prepared, right? It's not a dire warning. It's just understand that it's not the same mechanism to protect your white fence and the lock at the front door. It's not working anymore.
And we understand from this whole conversation that cyber threat is going to get increased and going to be more complex and more dynamic. Hence, individual, company, business, organization, law enforcement have to be ready to respond and address any attacks that we will receive from.
Yes.
Again, I would say thank you very much to founder and CEO of Full Armor and Cyber Armor, Danny Kim. Hope to see you again. And for all of the discussion will be featured in AWANI.com and across all social media.
Dia yang nak kata dah. Gapa dia hak jada buat. Gapa dia hak jaga buat. Ada restu.
KAHA, Kapla High Council. Sewa dan stream on demand atau sila ke saluran 480.
Thanks for joining us. This is The Economy. My name is Ibrahim Sani. As usual, we're at the environment of where we want to have the conversation. Currently, I'm at the offices of Lee Shamuddin Allen Gladhill. And of course, joining me on the show is a long-time friend of mine, Datuk Nitin Nadkarni, the consultant at Lee Shamuddin Allen Gladhill. Datuk, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us. The last time we spoke, it was more of the precipice of what the decision is going to be when it comes to the Sulu case. Right now, last month, we've seen how Malaysia has welcomed the ruling on the High Court of Justice of Madrid, stating that reinforces the government's commitment to defending the country's sovereignty and immunity against the Sulu claim. Generally speaking, we're accepting the fact that the toss out of the claimants are now done and final. Do you yourself welcome this kind of result?
Yeah, well, good morning, and thank you so much for coming to see me and inviting me onto your show again. Yes, I mean, what's happened is a heartening change of events from the disastrous situation we faced a few years ago when you had this enormous award for billions of ringgit, potentially registrable in 172 countries around the world, and usable not only against the government of Malaysia, but things like Petronas, QAP, EPF, all of the assets owned by the government and other government agencies. Potentially, I mean, there were defenses, but potentially enforceable against them. So now we've had a complete, the government has had complete victory, I think, in every jurisdiction in which this arbitration award is being considered. In Spain, The Spanish court said the arbitrator should never have been appointed. They revoked his appointment. When he refused to comply with the order revoking his appointment, they basically sentenced the arbitrator to prison for contempt of court for going ahead with the arbitration. And they revoked then in France, the arbitrator made a two-step decision. First, he ruled that he had jurisdiction. Then the Spanish courts had said, look, you cannot proceed with this arbitration because Malaysia wasn't properly notified of these proceedings. He then moved to Spain, he moved from Spain to France. The award on jurisdiction was registered in France. He said, France recognizes, I don't care what Spain does, I'm going to give my final award in France. The French courts have now held that there never was jurisdiction because they're saying there wasn't a valid arbitration agreement. So they've set aside, at the behest of the Malaysian government, they've set aside the preliminary award on jurisdiction. And obviously, if there never was an arbitration agreement, it just is a matter of time before they set aside the final award as well and say that since there wasn't an arbitration agreement, there is no arbitration award. The Dutch courts have also set aside the attempt to register the award, saying that, look, the Spanish court, which appointed this arbitrator, revoked his appointment. He had no business going and giving a final award. So it has been, so far, a complete victory for the Malaysian government on every front that they have fought this case.
The last time we had this conversation, you said that there is a possibility that the arbitrator can just shop around for any other jurisdiction that will give him the airtime.
Well, there's two things. One is the arbitrator can't. He's going to prison. And a jolly good thing that is too, because I think it'll send a message to other arbitrators not to behave in this manner. I can tell you that in the arbitration world, every conference I went to, when this case was brought up, all the arbitrators, all the counsels, senior counsels, were always shocked at this award and always said, this is going to be set aside. There is something inherently wrong with this. But the point is, even though the French courts have declared this, even though the Spanish courts, the Dutch courts have said this, there is a general principle in some jurisdictions that they don't care what other courts have said about an award. So the award itself, that document, that piece of paper, can still be taken to other countries where perhaps they have a different view of these matters. Not European countries, because the European judgments now, in EU all apply. Not common law countries, because common law countries would never even have recognized there as being an arbitration agreement in the first place. But other countries, I don't know, maybe in Central Africa, Central Asia, South America, we don't know how these things will be recognized. We don't even know how this award would be recognized in the Philippines. Bear in mind that as far as the Philippines is concerned, Sabah, they have a claim to sovereignty over Sabah.
Yeah.
So we don't even know how they would recognize this arbitration award. So that is the problem with an arbitration award. If it is not nipped in the bud, if you don't nip the proceedings in the bud, once the award is issued, you may have to fight in 172 countries, each of which has a say in whether they wish to recognize that award or not.
Do you think that the government of Malaysia has had ample time to take lessons from this and not just talk about the sovereignty of how Malaysia's borders are going to look like, but how we operate, generally speaking, in the future?
I would love to think that the Malaysian government would learn lessons from this. But does history teach us that the Malaysian government learns, or do they just say, okay, problem solved, now let's get on with life? I have not seen any indication of structural changes by the Malaysian government. Let's look at what started this. You had the Lahad Datu intrusion. We'd been paying on this lease, installments or whatever, annual rent on this lease for years. You had the Lahad Datu incursion. As a knee-jerk, what I might call a Donald Trump response, the Malaysian government said, we're not going to honor this lease anymore. There was no thinking, there was no taking of legal advice as far as I know, no consideration, what are the implications? It was just like a Donald Trump. But we're not America, we can't behave like Donald Trump. They just said, we're not going to honor this, and that's all there is to it. That's what triggered the arbitration award, the arbitration being brought out. Then when those proceedings came, the attorneys general didn't take it seriously as they should have, or at least it appears to me that some of the attorneys general did not devote the resources that they should have to this. We used to have a very fine international division in the Attorney General's chambers that would look at international treaties and international... We may still have, I don't know.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm not sure that we learned, or we learn. And the example I always give is the Pulau Batu Putih dispute. Did we learn to make structural changes in how we approach matters because of that? If you look at Pulau Batu Putih, there's a fascinating book written by a Singaporean, Professor Jayakumar, who was one of the counsels. He says that Singapore started preparing for the Pulau Batu dispute in the 1970s. They delegated a team of people who was going to look at this dispute. And these were people who were doing their masters or whatever in UK at that time. They sent them off to Kew Gardens. They were on scholarships, told them to research this. These same people were kept in charge of this same file. They joined the government services. They looked at this file all the way till they retired. And after they retired, they were called back. So you had that complete continuity for 35 years where they knew exactly what was going on. I don't know, but I suspect in Malaysia, we just kept changing the people, and each person who came in had to learn from scratch, and then you lose something in the process.
Yeah, you don't have institutional memory.
You don't have the institutional memory. You have the paperwork, but that's not quite the same thing. Again, with this, as I say, if we'd learned from Pulau Batu Putih, then we would have applied those lessons to the Sulu thing. We wouldn't have made a Trumpian knee-jerk reaction as to thing. We would have considered the matter, looked at the background, and what are the possible implications.
What about the roles, the law minister role, the separation of prosecutor with the AG? Does these things work?
Okay, you're now moving to a different question. In theory, one should separate the Attorney General from the public prosecutor. I think absolutely one should. The public prosecutor, the theory, the legal theory would be as a civil servant. The Attorney General would then be the advisor to the government. The DPP would be a civil servant, independent, and who would not be subject to any political pressure and would make decisions without fear or favor. These are all nice phrases, but you can't. But it depends on an understanding that you must appoint the right people, and more than that, it requires an understanding from the powers that be when to restrain themselves from exercising power. A lot of the powers of civil servants and judges, these are weak divisions. They really are. If you look at it institutionally, they have no power. Their power comes from self-restraint. Even in the most developed of countries like the US, and I come back to US because it's such a good example, where you have such a strong separation of powers. But Donald Trump can and has replaced the Attorney General, replaced prosecutors, and he's putting in place people who answer to him, even in such a developed, mature democracy. He's not exercising self-restraint. So in a country like Malaysia, which is a young country where we're still finding our way, if the powers that be don't exercise self-restraint, and there is a lot, then all these institutional reforms won't make a difference. Have the powers that be exercise self-restraint? Our first three prime ministers were all lawyers. All of them understood these constitutional principles. It's well known that they all exercise self-restraint. Civil servants, heads of departments, attorneys general were very powerful. If they said this is the position, it applied. I am not convinced that the subsequent prime ministers acted in that way. Maybe from the best of intentions. I mean, our fourth prime minister wanted to get things done. He wasn't interested in why I can't do things. It was get it done. I want to move the country forward. And that was a laudable aim, and we see the progress in the country, but in that process, something was lost, I think. The concept that you need to empower and exercise some self-restraint when you are dealing with institutions of justice. You cannot deal with institutions of justice, whether it be the courts or the prosecutors, in the same way as you might deal with a civil servant in the Ministry of Finance or a civil servant in the JKR. You know, there must be a difference in the way you treat them. And that, I'm afraid that none of our subsequent leaders, we've only had one subsequent prime minister who was a lawyer, and that's Ismail Sabri. But of course, there are other issues about that now. And to be fair, he was only prime minister for a very short time. There was no question of institutionalizing these kinds of framework.
And then, of course, we have to look into how the country is being governed today. And there's a lot of conversations into how income is going to be looked at very differently, how we get income, how we manage our funds, how we derive revenue from the various institutions that exist today. Do you feel that we are on the right track when it comes to how government gets revenue for the nation?
Okay, let's take a step back. In Tun Dr. Mahathir's time, in some ways he had it easy, because Petronas, our oil revenues and oil-related revenues were so huge that they amounted to half almost the government's budget. So there was free money, durian runtuh, that financed the government. Today, we don't have that. Our demands on the public purse have increased, salaries have increased, we want to spend more money on other things. Meantime, petroleum revenues have decreased. Somewhere that shortfall has to be made up. I think I said this once before in your program, GST was part of the solution. But for political reasons, it's now gone, unfortunately. We are one of the few countries in the world that doesn't have a value-added tax. So that money has to come from somewhere else. And where is it going to come from? And this is a problem. I think a French finance minister in the 16th or 17th century, Colbert, once said that the art of taxation is the plucking of the maximum amount of feathers from the goose with the minimum amount of hissing. What seems to be happening now is that the inland revenue is not only plucking feathers, but I fear that they may be slaughtering some of the geese that are there with the somewhat aggressive approach that has been taken in the past few years. I've had this conversation, especially in the past year, I've had this conversation with some of my foreign investors who have businesses here, and they are saying, well, we are reconsidering because tax is an important reason why we relocate or we allocate our businesses, particularly our head offices, in any particular country. And if the tax regime becomes unfavorable here, then we will relocate to another country. The world is open to us. So there is that problem that we have. I think there needs to be, if we are to have an aggressive tax department, and you know, I accept that sometimes revenue has to be aggressive and they have to they have to catch people who are evading, not avoiding, but evading taxes. Because when one person evades tax, that means those who pay their taxes are bearing an unfair burden. But there must be a proper recourse, and that is what we are lacking. There is no proper recourse mechanism against the activities of the inland revenue. The Parliament has said, if you don't like what the inland revenue does, go to a special body called the Special Commissioners of Income Tax, or if you don't like what Customs is doing, go to a special body called the Customs Appeals Tribunals. But these cases take a long time. Last year, I finally got a decision in a taxpayer's favor. This is 2024, in respect of an assessment that arose from income in 2006. There's a famous phrase, justice delayed is justice denied. And 18 years is a huge delay. You must have a recourse against whatever the revenue does, but where you can be heard within 6 months, 9 months, 1 year, 2 years maybe. Fair enough.
But in that case of yours, were there any interest paid?
No. So when we finally get back the money, there's under the law, the inland revenue just gives you back your money. They don't give you any interest. The cost they pay is minimal. So taxpayers, basically you're kept out of your money. In that case, I think the assessment was actually in 2012. You're kept out of your money for 12 years and you get back money today. And I think all of us know that money 12 years ago was worth more than money today. And sometimes it's 15 years. And there are delays along the process, and these are sometimes, I think, the Ministry of Finance creates institutional delays. So when I started practice in 1985, if the revenue made a decision and you appealed, within 6 months the case had to go to the Special Commissioners of Income Tax. Now that has been extended to a year. Now once it gets the Special Commissioners of Income Tax, they have to hear the case. For that they need sufficient manpower. And when you have a very aggressive inland revenue, you must therefore have enough judges at the special commissioners that they can expeditiously hear the appeals. We don't. We don't have enough judges. The judges who are there are under tremendous pressure. That means it takes time to get your hearing. The judges then have to find the time to decide your case. They then have to find the time to write a judgment, because until they write a judgment, you can't go to the next stage of appeal, which is the High Court. So I'll give you an example of a case we argued, I think, in 2022. The decision came out in December 2023, and I've just had a letter from the Special Commissioner saying they will only give us the written grounds of judgment in December 2025, which means I probably can't have my appeal heard in the High Court until 2026, and then there'll be appeal to the Court of Appeal. So you imagine how long that process is.
Sorry, there's a common theme I'm picking up here, Dato'. Not enough resource allocation at the AG's office or the AG's chambers when it comes to international borders. There's not enough resources for Inland Revenue Board to look at the cases. There's not enough resources at the tribunals to hear those cases. There's not enough resources among the judges. It seems like there's not enough resources everywhere.
So this is what I mean about recourse. They've beefed up the enforcement arm of the Inland Revenue. Fine, all good, I accept that. You do need to raid some people. Some people will not pay tax if they don't have to, and you do need to go after these people. Some people, you know, will keep 3 sets of books, and the only way you can catch them is if you actually go to their office in a team of 20 or 30 people and look at those books. All well and good. I support going after these people. But often, these things are not properly done. So if you're going to beef up your enforcement arm, you must also beef up your recourse arm. You must beef up the number of people. You must expedite the speed with which the appeals or challenges are heard. You must put time limits for the courts to hear those appeals and dispose of the appeals. And to be fair, you must then give the courts the resources to hear those appeals and dispose of them in that time limit. Otherwise, it's basically a one-way street. I can raid you, I can demand the money up front, because that's our law. You pay first and argue later. And then the Ministry of Finance, which governs the allocation of resources to hear the appeals. This is not the judiciary. Special Commissioners of Income Tax is not a court under the control of the Chief Justice. It's not appointed by the Minister of Law. The number of judges and the Special Commissioners of Income Tax is appointed by the Minister of Finance, who is also our Prime Minister, and has been for years always and they don't appoint enough judges and the Special Commissioners of Income Tax. So you beef up enforcement, you slow down recourse. Is that fair? Is that fair? So, you know, and I remember us speaking to somebody very senior about this, and the answer that was given was, oh, well, your clients are very rich, they can do national service. That's not the answer.
No, that's not the answer.
If you want them to pay more tax...
Economic standing of a client is not the precursor to having fair and justice.
And it may be that my clients are rich, but not every person who's unfair with tax assessments is rich. That's number one. But number two, if you want to raise more tax, do it properly according to the rule of law. Amend the law in Parliament. You know, there's a number of cases over the last few years that I've won in the courts, and Parliament has amended the law to get around it. Fine, that's the role of Parliament. That's how you do it. You don't do it by choking off the recourse mechanism that's given to taxpayers. There is one further recourse mechanism, which is you can bypass this whole special commissioner process by going direct to court for judicial review.
Oh, okay.
You can. And the courts have said, because Parliament has created a special mechanism for recourse, you should at first instance go there. Only in special cases will we hear you directly. And that's legally correct.
Yeah.
But you know, so in some cases they will give that mechanism, but by and large the courts say, look, Parliament has said you go to this mechanism, you deal with it. There is a special court of specialist judges to hear this. Go to them. That's the law.
Do you think that the situation is going to get more dire, or there are some hints of how this situation is going to be corrected?
No, it's not going to be corrected. Unfortunately, nobody is looking at it from the perspective of the taxpayers. Nobody is considering the macro position that taxpayers look at these things as one of the factors. It's not the only factor, but it's one of the factors they consider when they're investing in a country. If I invest in a country, I mean, let's take a step back. It is well known, the UN has written papers, the Nobel Prize last year was given to people who talked about why some countries are more successful economically than others. And one of the important factors is the security of your economic rights. Countries which have secure economic rights, secure recourse against governments that seek to confiscate their economic rights, have faster economic growth overall. How do countries seize your economic rights? An important factor is taxation. What is taxation? It is seizing a portion of your property. That's fine that you do this to finance things, that's all well and good, but you must have a proper recourse mechanism to challenge an unfair seizure. So if the government tries to acquire my land, I can go to the High Court, I can get a hearing quickly on that. If the government wants to seize my car, I can go to the High Court, I can get a hearing, or I can go to court. But if the government tries to take tax from me, seize my money from tax, I've got to wait 10, 15, 20 years to get my recourse. That cannot be right, and much needs to be done. But there isn't really a recognition of the need to beef up the recourse mechanisms for taxpayers. The courts, the government did a wonderful thing in the last 15 to 20 years by beefing up the courts. You know, in the 1990s, it could take you 15, 20 years to get a case heard through the courts. Tun Zaki came in as our Chief Justice, was it in 2008, 2009, and said, this is rubbish. A case should be disposed of within 9 months. If we're going to have proper access to justice, you must dispose of the case within 9 months. And to be fair to the Prime Ministers at that time and the Ministers of Finance, they allocated the resources to the courts so that cases could be disposed of. Okay, maybe not within 9 months now, maybe we're a little slow, but we're talking within a year and a half. You'll have your hearing, you have your decision. That's fair and that's fast by international standards, very fast by international standards. We're amongst the fastest courts in the world in Malaysia. We're, you know, and each of the Chief Justices since then has pushed that.
You're speaking past tense right now. You're speaking past tense. It's like,
no, but the current Chief Justice also has done wonders. They have by digitalizing the courts, the current Chief Justice has also expedited these processes. We have one of the most digitalized court systems in the world. So when you had lockdown all over the world during COVID, all over the world, Hong Kong, whatever, their courts were shut down. Our courts were functioning because everything was online. The judges could work from home. The lawyers could work from home. And everything could be done online. That was fabulous, and that was the current Chief Justice, and I have no doubt that the next Chief Justice will also promote this. But when it comes to tax, which is not under the purview of the Chief Justice, but under the purview of the Minister of Finance, nothing has been done. The processes today in 2025 are as slow as they were when I started practice in 1985, or slower. In 40 years, we have done nothing to improve the delivery system of justice in the tax, in challenges to tax.
The Minister of International Trade and Industry keeps on saying that we're getting this much billions coming in, approved FDIs. Clearly, that is indicative that, you know, foreign investors are not shying away from our markets. Is that something of a counter argument to the assertions that you're making right now?
No, and it's not. That's a counter argument for specific sectors. These people are coming in because they're given specific incentives to come in. So that is industries that is being driven by MITI. But are we satisfied merely to have sort of a top-down economy where the Ministry of Finance says, I want $1 billion in investment in data centers, and so I'm going to give an incentive for that? Or do we want organic growth? Do we want people to come in, not because the ministry targets them and says, come in and I give you a special incentive, but people say the environment here is so good that I want to come into this country. I'm knocking on the doors, both foreign investors, but secondly, even Malaysian investors say, I'm going to stay in Malaysia because it's so good here. I don't have to go to Singapore, Vietnam, or wherever else. Everything works here like magic. And that's what we want. There is really no reason. I don't think that the failure of the delivery systems in respect of tax, challenges to tax, is an act of commission. I think it's an act of omission. Nobody thinks about it, so nobody does anything about it. It's not that they've deliberately set out to stymie taxpayers. It's simply that they think, well, we passed this law. The law says you have this recourse, so it is done. I think, therefore it is, rather than I think, I have to act, and therefore it will be. So that's really where we are. Nobody's looking at this.
Final comments, Dato, in terms of where do you think the political will is going to come from? Do you think that we need a political champion out of this? Do you think that people need to, I mean, politicians are only as responsive or as sensitive as the populace is? Do you feel that there is a need for us to create awareness amongst the people so that the politician can react towards the needs and wants of the people? How do you think this is going to be resolved?
Well, this is always a big problem in every country. 90% of people in Malaysia don't pay tax. So they don't care about challenges to tax delivery systems. This is for the politicians to stop being politicians who respond merely to Trumpian politicians who respond merely to what people out there say, and move to the level of statesmen or stateswomen who think about what the country needs and put that in place. Stop being a Donald Trump, become a Lee Kuan Yew. Think about what is necessary. If you think about Singapore, they also had the same problems as us. In the 1990s, Singapore said, well, if we're going to progress and become a first world economy, we need to improve our justice system. We need to put grease in the wheels of the justice system. We need to allocate resources for all of these things. And they went right out and did it in every aspect of their justice system. In and of itself, that won't bring you foreign investment.
Yeah,
but it is one of the factors that improve. So really, if you have a Ministry of Finance, you have all the civil servants, thousands of them in the Ministry of Finance. Think about this. Think about the importance that if when you are plucking the goose's feathers, give him an avenue to hiss, rather than run away because he just says, this is not a country that is friendly. This is a country where the rule of law, right now we're in a situation where you could, with some stretching of the truth, say this is a country where the rule of law applies in everything except your right of recourse against tax assessments.
I would end there, actually. That would be one way to end an interview. That was Dato' Nitin Adkarni, the consultant at Lee, Shamuddin, Allen and Glad Hill. It's always a riveting conversation to be had. One thing that I will promise, if you would have me again, I would definitely have another conversation with you on many other topics as well.
I'd love to. I'm now a consultant. That means I have more time. I don't have to just spout at the Kedai. I don't have to just spout at the Kedai Kopi Mamak. In the Kedai Mamak, I can spout on camera instead.
Consultant is one way of saying semi-retired. That was Dato' Nitin. He is, of course, the consultant at Lee Shamuddin. If you've missed any part of this interview, or if you want to learn more about some of the past interviews, just head on to AWANI.com and search for Dato' Nitin. Till then, thanks very much for watching. Catch you in the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Uniform Tentera Darat Malaysia